Hello and welcome everyone to a new episode of Money Means Business. Today we are going to tackle together or to cover together the most important economic files which were discussed during the 7th mid-year AU meetings which was held in Malabo in Equatorial Guinea with the presence of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who addressed the gathering twice. Well, we were wearing two hats in addition of course to being of the founding members of the EU. We are occupying the presidency of NEPAD and also the steering committee of NEPAD and the capabilities of North Africa Committee. So there is a lot to speak about when it comes to the economic file of this meeting and the efforts exerted on the ground to activate African economic integration, because now it's a must, not a luxury anymore. Also, we are going to cover together the final communique which was released after the G20 meetings, and particularly to focus on this line in specific regarding the independence of the central banks, because this is something which is really combining politics and economy in the same time, and to implement this on the ground for the best interest of the world peoples, or to meet the aspirations of the world peoples. This is something we are going to discuss together with my dear guest live here in the studio, but we are going to start immediately right after the short break.
NEPAD is a serious effort to develop the African continent and eradicate poverty through partnerships with the international community and regional partnerships at the country level and at the level of economic blocs within the African continent. The new Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD, includes the African Union's vision for the economic and social development of the African continent. It was formulated and adopted by the heads of state of 5 African countries: Egypt, Algeria, Nigeria, South Africa and Senegal. It was approved by the Organization of African Unity (OAU) summit held in Lusaka, Zambia in July 2001. NEPAD's areas of work include agriculture and food security, natural resource management and climate change, regional integration and infrastructure, in addition to action programs in the infrastructure development sector, human resource development, economic governance and partnerships. The new Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD, aims to eradicate poverty, achieve sustainable development, address the marginalization of the African continent, empower women, integrate the African economy with the global economy, foster partnership among African peoples, achieve regional and continental integration, and partner with developed countries to narrow the gap between Africa and the continent. Egypt attaches great importance to NEPAD through supporting its strategies and plans to contribute to the development of the African continent, based on Egypt's status as one of the founding countries of the initiative, as well as its commitment to preserving the success story initiated by NEPAD as a benchmark for African development issues and efforts. On July 16, 2023, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, during his speech at the opening session of the African Union's Mid-Year Coordination Summit, reviewed the rapid completion of the second 10-year plan for implementing the African Development Agenda 2024-2034. He also reviewed the ongoing efforts to mobilize financial resources in priority areas, most notably infrastructure development, including important projects such as the maritime link between the Mediterranean and Lake Victoria and the Cairo-Cape Town Road. In contrast, the new Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD, proposes specific action programs, including supporting peace and security in the continent, achieving good political and economic governance, increasing agricultural productivity and achieving food security, maximizing intra-African trade and ensuring African exports reach markets. It also includes health, combating endemic diseases, particularly AIDS and malaria, and building African capacity while working to provide the necessary resources to develop the projects and executive programs necessary to achieve these goals. The Egyptian government seeks to enhance industrial and investment cooperation with African countries as a strategic focus for export development and increased openness to regional markets. According to the Economic and Social Development Plan, the government aims to raise the value of Egyptian exports to the African continent to approximately $20 billion by 2030 by supporting cross-border industrial partnerships, expanding joint investments, and enhancing the presence of Egyptian products in African markets. In the context of seeking cooperation with African countries, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli directed the relevant ministers to cooperate with sister African countries in implementing various projects which contribute to achieving common interests and strengthening economic and trade relations between Egypt and the countries of the continent. The Prime Minister added, quote, "There is great interest from various African countries to cooperate. Egyptian companies are implementing various development projects in their country in light of the achievements the Egyptian state has made over the past years in various fields and sectors." There is no doubt that the international economic crisis is undermining development efforts on the African continent, which necessitates considering new and unconventional funding sources. It also requires exerting efforts with the continent's partners to resolve the accumulated debt crisis, enabling the continent to regain its economic recovery.
Welcome back, and let's start immediately. And before that, let me welcome my dear guest live here in the studio, Dr. Ahmed Elleissy, Nassef, International Strategic Management Consultant. Thank you very much for being with us, sir.
You're most welcome.
And as I said in my intro, we are going to start with the G20 and with the final communique speaking about the independence of the central banks. Here, as also I said in my intro, it's just a mix between politics and economy. But before going into details, of course, each procedure taken on the ground, it has merits and demerits, consequences, pros and cons, let's call it this way. What are the pros and cons here, and if this is going to be implemented on the ground? Is it something for a specific timing to manage a crisis, for example, or this is a long-term plan which should be starting from now?
I think I read the communique of the G20, and I think what they're talking about an overall umbrella policy, whereas they do not want the central bank's policies or decisions, specifically when it comes to interest rates and reserve requirements and other measures that the central banks control. They do not want this to be part of a political agenda. And I think there is a bit of reference, and the most flagrant, and this is not a secret, I mean it's all over all the channels everywhere in the world, the flagrant disagreement that is in the US between the President Trump and Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve. Basically, they're speaking different languages. President Trump had made certain promises during his election campaign, and one of these sort of promises take the economy in a direction of openness and reduction of interest rates. Of course, the reduction of interest rates, especially in the American economic system, affects every household, because usually the way they work and everybody lives over there is in mortgaged houses or apartments or condos. So when the interest rate goes up, the mortgages go up automatically. It depends on the type of mortgage, which is a very complex product, but somehow there is always a reactivity in one way or another to the interest rate announced by the Federal Reserve. So when the Federal Reserve increases the interest, which is a measure that needs to be taken to control and cap inflation, everybody's paycheck and household economics gets affected because, say, for example, that somebody's paying $1,000 a month for his mortgage on monthly basis, that becomes, say, 1,200. So his disposable income gets touched immediately. President Trump had made many promises during his campaign that he is going to help reduce this. And this is a very critical thing. I mean, I mean, it is known as one of the key contributors to the decision-making process, whether to vote for that president or the other one, because that affects their daily life.
In a very direct way.
Immediately, his next paycheck will be reduced with a higher interest that's going to the bank, and that does not mean anything in his pocket. So instead of paying 1,000, he's going to pay 1,200.
Isn't it against what he called protectionism in America first and stuff like that?
Not really, no. That's still, no, that's not protectionism. That's
because when he used these terms during his
protectionism has to do
campaigns,
very much with the external world, okay, not the internal household in the U.S. The interest rate affects the internal households, which I think is what President Trump cares most about, because this is his electoral base, and at the same time, on the other side, you have Jerome Powell, who is the head of the Federal Reserve, one of the best economists in the world, and he has his measures. He is a very methodological person. The way he's doing things, only when he sees the data that suggests or recommends that he moves the interest rate down, he will only move the interest rate down. President Trump was very loud, was very outspoken about it, and he thinks that this is too slow and he needs to speed up things much more because the people can't wait and they need to have...
Let me put my question, sir, in other words, because I want to go into these details practically. Why, in your opinion, the G20 urged the independence of these central banks? And how this is going to have its impacts on the American and the global economy, and to go with the domino effect from the States to China to even the developing countries?
Very good question. Let's take a step further back and see that and agree all that the largest economy in the world is the U.S. economy. So whatever happens in the U.S. economy affects the rest of the world. If we dig a little bit deeper, we find that the biggest creditor to the U.S. economy is China. So number 1 and 2 economies in the world are shackled together, and that between them, that's almost over 40% of the global economy. Okay, so one move here will have a ripple effect on the rest of the G20, but number 1 would be China that will be affected. So basically, what this communique, if we want to take away the diplomatic jargon and the decent or nice way it was said, what does it say? It says, in plain layman language, if you want, it says very simply, please let the central bank head do his job, crunch his numbers, do his data, and recommend what is right for the economy. Because any decision, and that's between the lines, any decision that gets taken in the U.S. will affect every single country from the G20, and actually every single country in the world. And hence is that the request for independence. So they want the decision, that comes to be 100% economy driven, built on data, facts and
Based on science.
Absolutely.
I mean,
they do not
here
want.
they are saying that that Paul is a man of science, of man, or a man of economy,
Of course.
and American President Donald Trump is a businessman.
He is a businessman.
Yeah,
he's a very good businessman as well.
A very good businessman, but this does not mean that he should decide on the economic and strategic economic decisions taken by the Federal Reserves, or
this is in a nutshell. This is what they are saying.
Yeah.
It's worth also noting that the President Trump line of business is one of the most affected businesses within the American context of the interest rates, because he is into real estate, and all the real estate in the U.S. is sold on mortgage-based, and that affects the check pay, the monthly check pay that every household in the U.S. receives, either up or down, and also affects how much real estate they will be selling.
Yeah. What does it have to do with the American-Chinese trade war?
If they reduce the interest, where they should not reduce the interest, one being China will lose tons of money, huge amounts of money, and it's very hard to quantify because we don't know how much they will be reducing the interest with. Because the biggest holder of American government bonds is China. So it's as simple as if you go and buy one of these bonds in here, and you buy it, say, for 20% interest. So, and this is, you have your money in the bank, and the bank on the next day tells you, by the way, this 20% is no more 20%. It's only 10% now. So think of China.
Really, I mean, it's real value. I mean, 20%, this is theoretical, but it's real value.
No.
Sir, let me here represent the layman in the street, who is not an economist. But I am fully aware of the fact that if anything happened with the American economy, it's going to affect the global economy, and it's going to affect me here in Egypt, in Africa, the whole world. And as far as I can understand, that the G20 are there meeting to discuss the negative impacts of the Trump's policies of the tariffs, of imposing these tariffs on the whole world, and having these issues with the whole world, with the EU, with Canada, with Mexico, with, of course, China in the first, as a first item of the list, and they came up with that communique. Is this something that they decided to do, or to ask politicians and economists to do, to make sure that this is going to be a step on the right path to try to avoid the negative impacts of the trade war between the United States and America and the tariffs policies of Trump, or no?
No. The simple answer is no. This is another independent issue. It's boiling under the surface, and it could blow up on top of the trade war. That's a separate issue. If the interest rate is played with, quote unquote, without scientific backing up, based on a hunch, or it is being used to make voters happy, then the economy of the U.S. will be in a place that it's not supposed to be, and as a consequence of this, the rest of the G20 and practically the rest of the world, given that the US dollar is the #1 currency in the world, everything is going to get affected.
Let me here just say some of the comments which were said after the communique by South Africa's Deputy Finance Minister, because this edition or this round of the meeting was held in South Africa. He told the reporters that the meeting outcomes contained in the communique were consented to by all members and centered on strategic macroeconomic issues. So
that's a macroeconomic issue. Of course, the interest rate prevailing in a country is the number one macroeconomic issue. And if the interest rate is being decided on based on a hunch or for political reason or to make some voters happy, that's a huge risk to the economy stability.
hunch, risk, in one sentence?
Yes, yes.
And this is something which I can say can be the policy of a country or countries like the G20 countries?
They're hoping not to be. This is
Okay.
exactly what they're asking for. Not to make the hunches or the personal preference or the political desires of a certain party or a certain president affect the decision that's being taken in the interest rate against the scientific direction, if you want. And this is why, again, this is not a secret, this is all over the news and all over the media. President Trump has been very aggressive versus Jerome Powell. And one thing that we need all to note, that under the US Constitution, the president does not have the power to fire the head of the Central Reserve. So President Trump wants to go in a direction, Jerome Powell is going in the opposite direction, or let's say different direction, and they just don't see eye to eye. And basically,
No winner in this battle? Expectation.
The winner will probably, expectation to what will happen, 99% Jerome Powell will continue to preside in his post until the expiry of his term, which is May 26. And then President Trump will appoint somebody who's much more lenient and more, let's say, understanding to his needs. The only trick between this and that is that there is an election coming up for the midterm election. So this is the trick. So he's really pushing very hard, and Jerome Powell again went out and said, no, I'm not resigning, I'm staying in my post. And he said that President Trump said, I do not have the will even to fire him. He has very exceptional cases the possibility or the power to fire him, but I don't think any of these cases apply. So basically we expect this arm wrestling between the presidency or the White House and the Federal Reserve to continue for another, I would say, 10 months or so.
South Africa, under its presidency, its motto, solidarity, equality, sustainability, has aimed to promote an African agenda with topics including the high cost of capital and funding for climate change action. This was one of the issues, and I wanted to end this issue with that because I'm going to the African agenda of the other meeting which took place in Malabo in Equatorial Guinea, as the AU 7th round of mid-year meetings took place in Equatorial Guinea, as I said in my intro, with the presence of a number of leaders and head of governments, including President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who was there, and he was keen to address the gathering more than once. Sir, I'm going to take it from here and to mention those words, justice, sustainability, and integration as main points or main pillars which the African states are really eager to implement on the ground to achieve or to meet the aspirations of their peoples. Can we say which comes first?
Yes, we can. I think integration is a very high priority. Today, due to a lot of reasons, not necessarily are all good reasons, but we have a very low bilateral trade between the almost 50 countries in Africa, and we find a lot or many bilateral agreement between many countries in Africa and other foreign countries.
Which I call soft colonialism.
It is actually a very good way to call them because it's very simply residuals of colonization. I mean, typically the country in Europe that was colonizing a certain country in Africa would have a very favorable trade agreement between them, between themselves and the African country. So it's actually the extended or the modern type of colonization, if you want.
Since you mentioned the trade exchange, I want to tell you this number, and you tell me how do you see this number. Egypt AU members trade exchange rises to $9.8 billion in 2024.
The number is directionally, it's evolving. Yet, if we look at it in terms of the context of largest opportunities, it's very modest. Egypt exports close to some 40 plus, almost actually touching 45 billion US dollars. When we see that's about 2.9, that's hardly 5 and a bit, or maybe 6% of that trade going to 50 countries that share very advantageous logistical costs, that are very close, that do import many of the items that we produce and export in Egypt. That's a question mark. So we have very, very little trade, or the trade, let's say not very little, but the trade with another almost 50 countries in Africa needs to go up, needs to be much higher than 6%, and that's a two-way street.
Via
the integration. We need policies, and we need, for example, if we do have a certain product that is produced in Egypt, and we find ex-European country, I'm not going to name it, that has a certain bilateral agreement, that under this agreement leads that the product that is produced somewhere in Europe will arrive free of all duties and free of all taxes of any way, form or sort, to that African country. The Egyptian product is automatically blocked. You import something that could attract between custom duties, VAT, etc., some 30–40%, yet when you bring the same product from a European country, because of a certain bilateral agreement, it just goes in as if it was, you know, a local product of that country. Then we are blocked in many cases, but this is much harder to solve, actually, because it has roots in the relationship between the countries.
So the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area is the answer, or is the solution?
It is the solution, and it is the answer. Yet this is a huge challenge. This is very, very difficult to implement because of all the bilateral agreements, because of all the historical backgrounds that are different also for each of the African countries. But that should continue. And I love the way President Sisi put it when he said, Africa that we want is not really a dream. It's a reality, and it can happen. I love that phrase. Yes, it can happen, yet it's not going to happen on its own. Huh? It needs a lot of work, because it's as simple as we will remove a lot of the advantages that other countries outside the continent do have for whatever reasons, and share it and integrate between the countries of the continent. And that's simply going to be fought back. There is a lot of interest, there is a lot of money on the table that these countries and their companies will not let go easily to an Egyptian or actually other African countries. The good news is the potential of Egypt taken a very large part of that business once it's made available, which is not the case today, is very high. Because we do have very reasonable production base that is multifaceted, that will probably be able to adjust to the specific needs of many of these countries.
And we said it more than once that we are ready to exchange expertise in all domains and to make sure that our successful experiences can be implemented there on the ground. We do have the same circumstances in many fields. But sir, let me return back to the speech of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, as he mentioned also investing in the human being, qualifying the human cadres, whether with introducing to our youth or to our new generations in general, health and educational services in a way that built a generation capable of leading the future of this continent. How do you see this also?
I see this as a very actually tangled and a huge challenge as well. And I'll use a very funny example if you want. If you look at many of the football teams in Europe, you'll find that there are so many African playing there. That's just
France got awarded with the World Cup with African feet, and this what was written in all the sports news by then.
Fine. Why is it so? Let's look below the surface, because actually football we see on TV. What we don't see on TV, we don't see the chemists, we don't see the brilliant mathematicians, we don't see the brilliant computer programmers, we don't see the pharmaceuticals, etc. engineer. We don't see them on TV. They're not as visible and as merchandised as you get in the case of the football players. But I think it just sends the message. The low development rate that we have in the continent actually is making the continent a repulsive environment where people want to leave, to go and live elsewhere where they can be rewarded better. So if we reverse this and we elevate the standard of living in the continent, which will happen through many other steps which are quite challenging also. We have to reduce increase development, reduce military expenditure, because Africa, if you look at the expenditure of military and weapons in Africa, it is totally unproportional versus the size of the economies of Africa versus the rest of the world. Totally unproportional. So we have to focus on development. We have to focus on that. The reality is people will go where they have opportunities. So wherever there are good jobs, good education, and they can earn or have a safe life, people will go there. This is human nature. So it's as simple as we need to make Africa all of this. We need to make Africa reduce the poverty, and I think it's one of the angles that President Sisi has mentioned in his speech.
Silencing the gun, reducing poverty, developing the infrastructure, investment in human beings, especially via introducing health and education services, and encouraging the private sector, taking into consideration that the governments cannot on their own do anything, and without this public-private partnership all over the country, it's not going to be a successful story.
Ideally, yes, but like in Egypt, because many economists sometimes criticize Egypt or the Egyptian economy structure because of the role that some of the government companies are playing versus the private sector. The environment in Egypt, where the government went into in many different industries, was by necessity, not by desire. In many cases, especially after 2011 and that period, which was very shady, we needed to create jobs. Egypt was classified as a very high-risk country, and private investors would not do it. So the government stepped in and did that job. And now they're working and there's plans on how to exit. What I'm trying to say here is that timing of a certain decision is very, very important.
Sure.
There is no absolute right and no absolute wrong in any business or economic decision. It depends on the context and the information available and the environment where that decision is being taken. Honestly, I think in many cases in Africa, not in all cases, but in many cases in Africa, governments might have to follow the Egyptian model. They need to, which is actually, it's almost a BOT model, which is build, operate, and transfer. So in many cases, they need to build the fundamentals of industries, of operations in different directions, operate them for a while, and then transfer them to private sector, as we see Egypt now. I think they were just announcing today, I was watching, maybe about 10 companies that they will be put in on the stock exchange, which means government companies will be basically privatized through stock exchange. So I think in many cases today the private investor might be a little bit reluctant to go and invest directly in Africa. So maybe in some, again, I do not want to generalize, but in many cases, the government might need to lead the way, build it, operate it, and then transfer it. And that's a very well-known model of BOT.
Great, but when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals of the African Agenda 2063, do you think that we do have already stepped in the right direction to implement or to achieve these goals, or still 2063 is that far from what we achieved already? I mean, are we implementing the goals on the right schedule, or the plans which were made before?
There are many items on the schedule, so it's hard to answer your question with one size fits all. But if we try to take a bird's eye view on the situation, what we can say is we are definitely on the right direction.
Okay.
So we know what is the right thing to do and which direction we're going. Are we going at the right speed? My personal opinion would be, I'm not sure if this is the case. We need to accelerate. And we saw, which is again a case that I use over and over as a good example, the promises that they were made in Glasgow and in Sharm el-Sheikh for the environment. I mean, Africa is affected a lot with the environment. Well, they did not cause the problems, but they're getting very little help in that direction.
So it's a must to have this help and to be supported by those who committed this crime against our planet. And we all hope that tomorrow is going to be a better day and Africa is going to achieve all its aims. And as my dear guest said, or quoted President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the Africa we want is not a dream but a near reality. Sir, thank you very much for your input. Well, by this we come to the end of our episode. We were very much delighted to have with us Dr. Ahmed Elleissy Nassef. Well, now I'm going to leave you with the most important economic events which took place in the past 7 days. Till we meet again, same time on Nile TV International. Many thanks for watching. This was Nirmeen Abdurrahman.
In a move that reflects the state's drive to maximize domestic natural gas production and meet citizens' needs, Albornoz Gas Company announced the successful introduction of the Sparrow West 1 and Sienna DE wells into the production system. This qualitative addition represents a remarkable technical achievement, as the company has achieved an increase in natural gas production estimated at approximately 80 million cubic feet per day in a record period of no more than 3 weeks. In a move that strengthens Egypt's position as a leading investment destination in the renewable energy sector, a Chinese company plans to invest $500 million in 2 solar power projects in Egypt. These investments confirm the strong economic partnership between Egypt and China and support Egypt's ambitions to achieve its sustainable energy goals by 2030. The Suez Canal Authority is considering cooperation and participation in the development project of Abidjan Port in Côte d'Ivoire, the largest commercial port in West Africa. This project will support the port's overall import and export traffic and contribute to enhancing trade between Egypt and Côte d'Ivoire. This came during a meeting held by Oussama Rabia with the ambassador of Côte d'Ivoire to Cairo. Rabia noted that the Suez Canal Ports Company has successfully developed the Libyan port of Sirte and reopened it to maritime navigation after a 14-year hiatus. Egypt has succeeded in strengthening its position as a global digital corridor after landing the CW6 submarine cable in Port Said and Ras Gharib as part of a consortium of 16 international companies. The new cable connects Asia to Europe via 17 countries and is one of the largest submarine communications projects in the world. The project reflects a strategic vision to transform Egypt into a global data center and supports the digital economy in light of the rapid growth of technology and artificial intelligence. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, revealed in a report that Egypt has succeeded in narrowing the financing gap by $5.8 billion during the 2025-2026 fiscal year, a significant decrease from the estimated $11.4 billion gap for the previous fiscal year 2024-2025. The fund confirmed that the Egyptian government has succeeded in securing firm financing commitments to cover its needs over the next 12 months, which ends in January 2026. Goldman Sachs believes that the Egyptian pound is undervalued by approximately 30%, explaining that inflation, terms of trade and productivity data show that the Egyptian pound is currently the second most undervalued currency at approximately 30%. Goldman Sachs emphasized that strengthening foreign exchange reserves provides an additional factor supporting the pound stability and also provides a potential opportunity for the currency to appreciate if the Central Bank of Egypt decides not to accumulate further reserves. During the mini-meeting with the government, President Elleissy urged the establishment of partnerships with the private sector and attracting foreign investment in retail trade and retail chains. He also encouraged the efforts of the Ministry of Supply and Internal Trade and its preparations to launch government-run retail chain called Carry On as the first unified brand in partnership with the private sector. In the same context, efforts to develop domestic trade and to refine the database of government support beneficiaries were reviewed, ensuring that support reaches those who deserve it and who meet the relevant criteria and conditions. The Egyptian Tourism Promotion Authority has launched a new electronic campaign to promote Egyptian tourism in the Arab market. in cooperation with the global platform Wigo, one of the most prominent search and online booking engines in the Middle East. The campaign will continue until June 2026 as part of the implementation of the international promotional campaign under the slogan Egypt Unparalleled Diversity. The launch of the e-campaign comes as a result of its high effectiveness in reaching diverse segments of tourists in various tourism markets, achieving the desired impact directly and quickly, while highlighting the unique tourism assets of the Egyptian destination.